Our second question is who owns the means of production? So we had the last question was who determines the prices, and we got that difference between market economy and a command economy. And obviously, capitalism is usually associated with the market economy side. So who owns the means of production? Now, when we say the means of production, we mean the stuff that is used to make stuff. So it's going to be things like factories, land, things like that. But it's also going to be money. Who's got the money? So there are a couple systems. Number one, let's start with socialism. And honestly, this is all coming really from Marxism. But we're going to start with socialism. Who owns the means of production in socialism? And the answer is the people. They're going to own the means of production in common. So there's two ways to think about this, and I know you saw this in that last video, but let me just break it down even more simply than that video did. If we're talking about socialism, now the video said there was no such thing as a communist economy, and there hasn't been. Think about, how do I put this? All right, let's say that I'm a teenager. Let's say I'm a tween. Here I am a tween, and here's an adult, okay? If tween is capitalism and adult is communism, then puberty is socialism. You have to go through this to get to this. So the people own the means of production. In socialism, that's going to mean it's state controlled. The government controls the means of production on behalf of the people. So it's still the people that owns it, but the government's going to be the thing that sort of helps do that on behalf. They're representing the people. Communism is people controlled. And once you've reached communism, there's no need for a state, which is why we've never really seen that just yet. But that's the idea here. So I'll give you an example. Collectivization. This is agricultural socialism. So right now what we have is we have farms. Let's say agriculture farms are owned by people or corporations in America. That is capitalism 101 right there. It's private property. It's either owned by that farmer or it's owned by this corporation. And the corporation, though, is not all the people. It's all the people that have bought into this corporation, which is private property. What collectivization is where these large farms are owned in common by a group of farmers, a collective. And then in this sort of in this system, in socialism, the production and the distribution is managed by the state. So the state says to the farmers, we need corn. So the farmers grow the corn because the state tells them to, and then the state helps distribute that corn to the people. It's determining prices, it's determining what's being grown, it's even determining, who gets to be a farmer and who doesn't. Again, problem that we don't like. Now, that's a very extreme version of socialism. There are a lot of things between capitalism and socialism, but again, it's a line like this. The socialism, say in Europe, is more over here. Definitely leaning towards socialism, but not like the socialism I just talked about, like the Soviet Union or anything like that. What are the downsides of socialism? Well, sort of the obvious one, the one that most people are going to think of is, does it even work? And most of the time when I have this conversation, the first thing somebody says is Soviet Union was socialist. By the way, the Soviet Union, USSR, one of those, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, socialist. It's not communist. The Soviet Union was on its way to being communist, but it wasn't communist. Does it work? And the first thing is like mass starvation in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. They collectivized in the late 20s, early 30s. They did that thing we just showed on the last page, and then tons of people starved. And the argument goes, as a good capitalist will tell you, why did those farms starve? And the answer is, if we all own this in common, remember that video we watched the other day about the free rider? If we all own this farm in common, which means whatever we make, we all get to enjoy, then what's my incentive of contributing? I'll just free ride on what the rest of you guys are doing, and so will the other farmers. And the end result will be underproduced. Lack of incentive to work common land, and you get underproduction. That's going to be one of the big problems with socialism. Another problem with socialism, it seems to contrast with basic liberal principles. Remember liberal principles? my ability to choose my own good life. Now, the question is, does it? We could have a deeper conversation about that, philosophical conversation. But for now, just think, does socialism violate liberalism? The answer is, it depends what socialism we're talking about, how far you want to go towards socialism. Heading towards socialism is not this horrible, horrible thing that we make it out to be. But it's definitely, it creates some questions. All right, flip side is capitalism. Who owns the means of production in capitalism? I already told you a little bit earlier. The means of production are privately owned, private property. So that means it's either owned by individuals or, really more likely, owned by corporations. The corporation is just individuals buying in, coming together to buy something. That's what a corporation is. And so in this, I'm rewarded for my work. We call this meritocracy. In other words, those who have earned it, merit, they're the ones who should rise up. So this is the whole idea, is that in this system, let's say that I own a farm. This is my farm, or even a corporation owns a farm. But let's say I own this farm. If this farm does well, I get more money. If this farm does poorly, I get less money. So I have an incentive to make sure the farm does well. This is the whole bit we just talked about. I have an incentive to work harder. I'll get more reward, and so do you. And we get this whole thing. The whole thing is driven by us competing with each other. And that competition is what drives the economic growth. If you get satisfied in a capitalist system and just sit back, you're going to get overtaken by the person who's not satisfied and wants to work harder. So you have to constantly work, constantly compete. That's the only way to survive. There is no such thing as success. All you can do is be successful in that moment, but if you get comfortable with that, you're going to get mowed down the next day. You have to constantly be competing in this until you retire and get a gold watch. That is the end result, and then that's the end. So congratulations. I mean, and this is, again, are there downsides to capitalism? That kind of is a downside, that it essentially creates this competition between each of us all the time for everything. But let's talk about some downsides of capitalism. Number one, does hard work equal rewards? This is a very interesting question. For example, some types of work are valued and others aren't. Like, for example, let's take teachers, public school teachers. Man, these guys work super hard. My wife is a teacher. She works way harder than I do teaching college, and yet I get paid more than she does. Why? Because we value some types of work more than others, not necessarily because of the hard work, but just because they're valued differently. Are my rewards strictly based on my work? What other things are affecting the rewards I get from them? To the extent that they're not just based on hard work meritocracy, this becomes a real problem of capitalism, is that some people make more because they make more, and it doesn't seem like it fits into the idea of capitalism. Okay, another downside of capitalism that we're going to talk a little bit about later here is inequality. One of the best ways to succeed in capitalism is to have already succeeded in capitalism. If I want to do well in capitalism, I need some money to do well. So I need money to make money, and if I don't have money, it's really hard to make money. Sure, some people are going to do well, get through the educational system, succeed, but honestly, the odds of someone who is poor succeeding is far less than somebody who's rich succeeding. Is that a good system? Is that a good way that this works? And the whole capitalist system works in such a way that the poor stay relatively poor and the rich get relatively richer. And is that a good system? Is that what we want to sort of reward there? One more idea, and that's class warfare. This is the thing the socialists have a problem with. The owner gets all the profits. If I go to work for a business and I start working in a factory and I work really, really hard, I get my wage. That's it. What does the owner of the company get? They get more. If there's more profits being made, they get the profits. I don't. I get my wage. Now here's the deal. This is very Marxist here. Picture Karl Marx. Here's a dude with a beard. That's a Karl Marx beard right there. See how big and full it is? The worker sells their body for a wage. This is, Marx is going to say, we'll give him a top hat. Marx is going to say that's essentially the same thing as prostitution. When I stand up in front of the class and I'm doing my whole song and dance for you guys, am I just selling my labor for a wage? And what he's going to call this is perpetual oppression, basically slavery by other means. It's slavery, you just don't really know it. And so, again, what Marx and other socialists might say is this whole system's got a problem with it, because the more people that find themselves in that position, the more they're going to get fed up with it. And as they get fed up, they're going to have revolution. This was from the Communist Manifesto that you probably read back in elementary school. I doubt they read the, high school. Communist Manifesto, workers of the world unite because this system, it sucks for you. It's great for that 1% that's really rich, and maybe you're in that 1%, but the other 99%, and again, don't just think about America, look around the whole world. Think about all the people in the world. They're kind of getting screwed over by all this system. And is that a good system then? All right, take a break. Don't take a break. I'm going to take a break. You're going to watch a video.